Hi, I'm Sky, a video editor, game developer, and a content creator. I have in the past made memes and academic inquiry from the perspective of, and on the idea of, a trans woman programmer. And finally, I did it! For the past few months, I've almost been exclusively using Linux. macOS used to work, and so did Windows to some lesser extent. They're not just buggier, but also slower, and also just in-shitifying with AI features that you can't trust any of your data on because you just know it's being fed to either ChatGPT, Claude, etc. Blah blah blah, and it's like, and then you're gonna one day like be somebody's gonna be like, okay, so what is the personal information of XYZ person? And it's gonna just be given to them by ChatGPT. Blah 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 blah. Most people's reason for not trying Linux is their perception that the barrier to entry is extremely high, and while there is some truth to this, you have to recognize that some people's barriers to entry might be higher or lower than others. As someone who's been working with the Unix CLI for years, the idea I might need to copy, paste, or type commands into the command line was more exciting than daunting compared to someone who's opening up terminal for the first time. There's no denying a feeling of missing out if you're not tech savvy or willing to learn a few commands. Though, I experienced a fear when I see somebody use NeoVim. I like breaking norms and doing the silly thing, doing the more fun thing. It's rewarding to see everyone else using a different operating system than you and just being like, hey, I use Linux. But in all seriousness, no, there is a kind of intrinsic reward in my brain to do the thing that is a little bit harder but a little bit more customizable to who I am and as a person. The open source model of Linux and many repositories allow us to see others' work, learn from them, and expand on them in the case of deprecation or obsolescence. And if a distro starts implementing shitty practices or corporatizing really hard, you can just switch to a new one and retain most of the knowledge you've built up. I will be linking all of the software and hardware that I use in this video in the description below, and while you're at it, it would mean a lot if you subscribed or joined my Discord server as well in the description below. I'm currently using Asahi Linux on my M2 Mac, which is an ARM processor. Main issues I've run into so far are mostly from running Linux on an ARM processor compared to an x86 processor. Using Linux on ARM, I genuinely notice there are just some things I can't run. Discord's native app or DaVinci Resolves don't work on Linux ARM, but do on x86. There are workarounds, such as running Discord in a browser, or using KDN Live instead of DaVinci, but it feels like kind of being a Mac user a few years ago where there were just some Windows apps that defied you to the very end. Asahi partners with Fedora, so starting out, I went with Fedora KDE, as that was my only choice. I would have loved to use Arch. You're telling me a version called Alarm exists, Arch Linux on ARM, and I didn't know about that until I was already like completely like in my groove with Fedora. I could have been more of a stereotype for this video. Arch sounds like a dream, and as much as I despise when things go wrong, it teaches me a few things about how the systems I'm using actually work. It's kind of the equivalent of a modular computer-like framework to use Arch, and I genuinely see the appeal in the frustration. I recently switched from KDE to using Noctalia and Niri. It's honestly been a switch that's so satisfying that it made me want to make a whole video on why I use Linux now. It got that feeling of jankiness as well as like just fun to it. I feel like I'm making small accomplishments towards a task and having fun doing it. If I didn't, I would get executive dysfunction to kick in. As a content consumer, Linux's faster boot times, application open times, and overall snappier feel make doing anything feel smoother. Niri makes watching YouTube videos while multitasking on Discord or elsewhere way better than my experience on Mac or Windows or even Fedora KDE. I've even made the transition to using the Zen browser, which I've had recommended a lot, with vertical tabs, something that I just can't really go without now. Steam works about as well as any Linux using Proton, but Steam as a platform itself is glitchier than I'm used to. Sometimes it just turns purple and it's weird. If you edit in VS Code or VS Codium like me, you'll probably not finding any issue, and if you edit in NeoVim, you are doing better than me and you probably already use Linux. Other tools such as Godot work perfectly, and it's actually one of the highest rated apps, and probably likely will continue to work well due to their banning of AI assist commits. I haven't tried Unity on this, but Unity has been going down the bloat and enshittification pipeline so hard anyways. I recommend that I recommend Godot instead. For video editing, and this is where I'm gonna have the most complaints, I decided to edit this entire video on KDN Live to see if/when I resume work with other creators, I can get everything done on here. I'm not a fan of DaVinci. And Premiere just isn't an option on Linux. Most of the cuts and edits I do are essentially just photoshopped or drawn, then simply placed on a timeline with some keyframe movements. It's involved, but ultimately not complicated. And I don't edit all that optimally, just in the way that works best for me. KDN Live is built for keyboard users, which is a little bit different than what I'm used to. Once I get used to that and can work more effectively, I think KDN Live would be about equivalent to Premiere Pro, except for speed. Premiere, Final Cut Pro, or DaVinci all are much faster than KDN Live. In Premiere and DaVinci, I can get away without making proxies sometimes. Meanwhile, in KDE, for a small project with a 10-minute clip in 1080, I have to make proxies, and even for smaller clips. I suspect it's due to some hardware stuff on Asahi, and I assume I would just have an easier time on something that isn't an ARM processor. I definitely miss having access to Affinity or Photoshop, as GIMP or Inkscape they just don't feel as good. I sometimes use Photopea, but since I'm transitioning to using more art in my videos, I have been experimenting with Photoshop on my tablet. In that vein, I do very much miss, compared to macOS having AirDrop, but Linux is very easy to just plug in your device and access the DCIM. It's not too much worse. My overall experience with using Linux has in some ways been better and in some ways been worse than macOS. What it has been, though, is a lot more fun. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's just kind of janky a lot of the time, and it's the right amount of jank for my brain to be like, okay, I go like sidetrack on a different quest, or I can get like other sorts of brain stimulation in between working on projects and that kind of thing. If you are to try Linux, above all else, consider it to be a fun experiment rather than forcing yourself to stick with it for a certain amount of time. An experiment in which you embrace the sort of quirkiness that Linux has, and one in which you open yourself up to learning new things about technology and about how operating systems work. Not in depth, of course, but just a little bit. It's not going to be worth it for everyone, but if you've stuck to the end of this video, you probably are in the camp that wants to try out Linux. So go ahead and remember, subscribe. Bye. Mew Mew girl, so get out of the way. With her pretty revolution, she'll make every bully pay. The rhythm that she dance to, the darkness that consumes you. She's saving the day, Mew's got it okay. She's a Mew Mew, so get out of the way. With her pretty revolution, she'll make every bully pay. The rhythm that she dance to, the darkness that consumes you. She's saving the day, Mew's got it okay.